Hi, magandang gabi. Ako po si Trixie Cruz-Angeles. Ito po ang LUMINOUS. Okay, bago tayo mag-umpisa, pakisabi na lang po kung meron tayong audio. Hi, kay Marus, Ma'am Ninita, kay Sir Sam, Christine, Maneka, Ande, Melindrina, Pinky Dust, Edmond, Jesus Jr., Ma'am Pinay, hi! Ma'am Ninita ulit, Ma'am Emily Ann Bacolod, Sir Bernard, Ma'am Bernarda, Rose Jean Lakay, Ma'am Jennifer Condo. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. And for those who will be watching this later on replay, magandang araw din po sa inyo. Ayan, may audio tayo. Ah, check ko lang at itong sinasabi ni Draw Simply. Dagdag ko lang kanina sana sa karambola ng 2019, nag-travel ako sa Taiwan, mga bata doon mahilig magbasa doon sa bookstore, doon sila nakatambay. Yes, that was the topic kanina po sa karambola. Yan, malinaw tayo. Good evening kay Sir Byron Edmond. Way I see it. Okay daw po ang audio. Alright, let's get started. Here on the screen, I'm showing you the Q&A, questions and answers. Oops. Question and answer on the, these are on the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement para lang naiintindihan kung ano yung nature nito. Of course, dito sa write-up na to, sa Q&A na to, it's primarily they're talking about the benefits of EDCA. So, this is envisioned niya to advance the implementation of the Philippines-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty and pursuant also to the Visiting Forces Agreement dito. What purpose does it have? Ito yung sinasabi ko at the last video na interoperability, capacity building towards AFP modernization. Please take note ha, it's capacity building ha. Capacity building, meaning hindi po, this is not about equipment. They're not going to give us any new equipment. They're not going to provide us at good prices or anything like that. It's capacity building. Kaya yung balikatan po is training. Kaya pinag-uusapan earlier on doon sa Karambola is that um, we were discussing how the Americans would train our soldiers and sometimes using equipment that we don't have. Tapos pag alis ng mga kano, tangay nila yung kanilang mga equipment, leaving us behind na natatakam yung mga natin, officers and men, natakam doon sa equipment. So it's been suggested that the Balikatan is primarily a marketing instrument rather than a capacity building one, di ba? So the third is strengthening the AFP for external defense. Okay, but again, ito rin yung balikatan, yung mga visiting forces agreement, yung sa visiting forces agreement natin to, well, to strengthen the capacity of our officers and men in the AFP for external defense. Bakit? Ang primary na trabaho ng ating AFP lately and in the past decades has been on the insurgency. So dito, they're seeing that we should strengthen them in external defense, which I agree naman, we do need strengthening, but we also need to build up our weapons and defense systems. Maritime security. Now, what does maritime security mean? So, ito yung sinasabi ng US that they will be going on joint patrols. Pero, it's dangerous when they say they're going on joint patrols in the South China Sea. Because while part of that is the West Philippine Sea, the other part is the high seas. Bakit kayo nagpapatrol ng high seas unless you're going after pirates? Diba? I hope hindi sila naghahanap ng kaaway. Maritime domain awareness. What does this mean? Maritime domain awareness is the familiarization with what is, well, not just our territory, but the interplay of forces in the various jurisdictions in the area adjacent to us. So, ano yun? That also pertains in part not just to our territorial waters, but also to the West Philippine Sea. So, humanitarian assistance and disaster response, ito po ang primary reason for the additional uh, areas where they will be stationed. Uulitin ko po iulitin ko ng uulitin, wala pong additional bases. That's not true, wag po natin i-exaggerate. There will be no additional bases here, but there will be additional presence of personnel and equipment. Sabi ni Andres Teves, piracy has been in existence since the Spanish time. I'm sorry, that's not true. It's been in existence longer than that. Because the first pirates were Chinese, and in fact, we've had history. Of course, si Limahong was here when the Spaniards were here already. Yeah. So, yan. Balik na tayo sa screen. Sabi ni Okay, puro magandang gabi. So, sabi ni Andres Teves, cheap are the long-playing records, books, personal computers in Taiwan because they have no copyright laws. Since they're not recognized by the UN, that's why all American products that were cheap came from Taiwan in the 70s. That's interesting. Hi kay Don, sabi niya, can the PH make a declaration of permanent neutrality? Yes, of course, we can choose that. We can choose to do that. Ang presidente po, ang architect ng ating foreign policy, and he has to make the declaration. Of course, if nothing stops the Senate and Congress from formalizing the declaration through legislation. But in general, it has to be posted by the president because all foreign policy will stem from that declaration later on. But it will dictate what our foreign policy is going to be. So, mga common questions or frequently asked questions on the EDCA is that, not naman frequently asked questions, but often our comments, no? Yung comment, halimbawa, that the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the of EDCA. Yes, but I wonder why you're saying that. I don't think the legality or constitutionality of EDCA is placed in issue dito. Maraming nagkakagulo because yun nga, SAS had posited the observation that based on pronouncements by the US officials, primarily military officials, they are preparing for war or conflict at the very least, diba? So, and people are saying na, sige, then this has brought us closer to war. Then suddenly, for some reason, people are saying EDCA is constitutional. Well, yeah, of course it's constitutional. That's not the issue here anymore. The issue is why the president authorized 4 additional areas for the visiting forces at this time. So really, it's a question of timing rather than a question of constitutionality. There's also no question that the EDCA has been implemented and is being implemented. President Duterte, although he delayed its implementation, did begin it, and President Marcos does have the option, as he has exercised, to tweak or to reinterpret the provisions of EDCA to include additional sites. Well, not reinterpret kasi wala naman pong nakalagay dun sa EDCA na mayroong number of areas where they can be. Ito, sabi ni The Way I See It, joint patrol sa pinag-aagawang teritoryo. Di ba conflict dun sa sinabi ni PBM na I don't understand what you're saying. Pakiulit na lang po. So yan, other frequent comments, halimbawa, is that raising the, sa palagay mo ba nakakatulong ang EDCA? Sabi ni Nor Cabrera Mendoza. Di kaya maging mitya lang ito ng gulo sa atin and China. Well, First of all, yun na nga, it was entered into earlier, so medyo bound ang presidente natin dito. But he could have opted to delay the additional sites na wag sabayan yung girian ng US at saka China. Makakatulong. Well, they do conduct trainings. They do conduct, ano ba yan? Yung humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. They were present during Yolanda. Um, Itong concern lang natin is the fact that binabandera na nila, as currently reported by the Manila Times, binabandera na ng ilang opisyalis nila yung supposedly pagkampi natin sa kanila as they gear up for a possible conflict in Taiwan. Sabi ni Alvin, I believe adding more sites by the US and the Philippine government will allow us to promote more safety. Really? Why was it safe when they were here before? I don't think it stopped China from encroaching in more territory. Remember, under the administration of former President Duterte, maraming tayong skirmishes with China over, encroaching into territory. We have filed over 100 diplomatic protests. So it did not stop. EDCA has been in existence since 2015, to signed in 2014. So how were we safer given the actions of China during that time? So I think we have to answer that question before we can make the conclusion that we are safer. Because when you say safer, you also have to set standards. And what is your evidence for saying safer? And what is your evidence for saying safe dati? Or at least your argument, not necessarily evidence. Ilang porsyento ang possibility na maging battleground tayo? Why are you asking me to compute odds? Porsyento, do you think that you will believe me if I say 20%, 60%, etc.? I think you have to set what the standards are first so that we can actually count. Di mawala sa isip kong gagawin kung mangyari ito. Well, yun nga. While I agree that Sasa's statements have very real and solid basis, right now we need to discuss among ourselves and with our government what are we going to do should this happen, or at least ask if the president doesn't believe that this scenario is possible, and why and how to navigate the statements of our stand as the Philippines in relation to the statements of the US's military officials. Sabi ni Wanyaete, why is he militarizing our country by adding more foreign foot soldiers dito sa PH? The president has sole discretion over our foreign policy, and that includes allowing more soldiers from the foreign military subject of our visiting forces agreement and the EDCA. So, and because that is constitutional for him to exercise that discretion, we can ask for more transparency in his decision making. So yun po yun. The why, I cannot answer that because it is the president who can answer that. And as citizens, we can ask. We can demand that kind of information. Ito, sabi ni Sir Tatay Strauss, it's a most unfortunate misconception of our friends in the West that their enemies should and must be our enemies too. Citing Nelson Mandela, the marketing ploy is a joke. I agree. We were actually talking about it in Carambola as a joke, but unfortunately, it also is very real. Sabi ni Dini, lagi po nasasali ang mga US think tank na nagsasabi may imminent war US versus China. Gaano or how often po ba tama ang US think tanks? I'm not sure I can answer that question because that would mean I'd have to count and and relate them to other arenas of conflict. So what I can say is that um, they do have basis in what they're saying, and if it is a military official talking about military operations or future military operations, I would take it seriously considering that same military official has not been censured by his president. Sabi ni Wanyete, di po ba iba na leader ng Taiwan si Kuomintang na who is pro-peaceful unification with mainland China? Yes, and that certainly is a factor that we can consider. Um, but let's see, diba? Of course, he could be pro-peace. We will have to see how they work it out with mainland China. Sabi ni Ian, I remember the Pemberton case, part Bush and VFA. Actually, yes, the Visiting Forces Agreement prescribes the code of conduct and the jurisdictions between the US and Philippines. Even things like kanino kailangan bang irehisto yung mga kotse ng American servicemen and so on are spelled out in the Visiting Forces Agreement. So the jurisdiction of the Philippines with regard to a criminal case in which the accused is a US serviceman is spelled out in the Visiting Forces Agreement. Yes. Sabi ni Ma'am Christine, the United States is increasing its military presence in the Philippines, gaining access to four more sites. Yes. And strengthening the Southeast Asian nation's role as key strategic partner for Washington in the event of conflict with China over Taiwan. Yes, ma'am. Well, I think that is an accurate description of the events right now. Sabi ni Nor, it means damay na tayo once nag-ignite ang giyera ng Taiwan at China. Well, I don't think it might be limited to the possibility of conflict, pero it could also affect things like our trade agreements with China, our loans, and so on. We'll see how China conducts itself in its relations with us once I think the effects of this partnership with the United States become evident. Sabi ni Ma'am Marilu, what's the difference na merong 5 nung panahon ni PRRD, 4 bases ngayon sa term ni PBBM? Because it's a new message. Dati, well, accepted, new president, but the former areas or the 5 bases in which they had access were in compliance and made compliant by President Duterte. But they have new talks with the president now, President Marcos, and it's a strong message. Not only are they building on the 5, well, they added 4, meaning plus you take that with the other statements, such as the joint patrols, which is a statement by itself, as well as the speech of the president saying that the US will always be part of Philippines' future. Now, if you take those 3 things into consideration, then that is a strong statement that at this time the Philippines stands by the United States should it become in, and we will have to be consistent in that stand should conflict break out. Kasi part yun ng Mutual Defense Treaty natin. Sabi ni Wei, I see joint patrols with the US sa pinag-aagawang teritoryo di kaya in conflict sa sinabi ni PBBM. The future of this problem should be entirely dictated by the countries involved and not by others. Well, um, possibly, yeah. Yes. Sabi ni Glenn, dapat magpasalamat ang Taiwan sa Pinas at alagaan ng mabuti ang ating OFW sa kanilang bansa dahil nakalaan ng Pinas na magsakripisyo para sa interes ng Taiwan. I'm assuming you're being sarcastic in that one. Sabi ni Dennis, bakit di man lang lumabas sa dyaryo o TV yung lagdaan nila tungkol sa EDCA, basta na lang nag-build sila? Sir, actually, yung lagdaan ng EDCA happened in 2014. So, hindi mo talaga makikita yun ngayon. Yung additional sites are an interpretation of that agreement. Kasi, well, sort of an interpretation kasi hindi naman nakalagay doon sa original, sa agreement. There's no amendment ha. Nakalagay naman doon sa agreement that walang nakalagay doon that there's a number of areas where they can be stationed. Sabi ni Sir Alvin, the increased number of soldiers and equipment will deter inside and outside threats. No, definitely not on the inside threats because we've always had during the time when we had U.S. bases here, it did not stop the proliferation of insurgencies, such as but not limited to the NPA and the various terrorist organizations that continue to operate here. So, how can you say that it's going to be a deterrent when it has never been a deterrent before? If there is an increase, it would be more of a deterrent, or because of the increase, magkakaroon ng deterrence. Now, how can you say that when they've always been here? Why would the increase make any difference? I mean, it's an argument, yes, but I disagree that it is a plausible one. Sabi ni Just Simply, baka pwedeng maiparating kay BBM na he needs na magkaroon ng parang 1-hour discussion regarding this EDCA. Parang gikan sa masa ni PRRD. I don't think that it would be wise to tell him to do something that his predecessor had done, but it would be nice for us to ask the president to address us and discuss this, or at least somebody from the administration. That's another comment, no? Earlier on, merong nag-post dun sa wall namin at sinabi, hindi kailangan magpaliwanag ang presidente kasi matagal na yung EDCA na yan. I think that the president had even promised as early as what time when he assumed office that he will continue to address the people on important matters. And I think this is one of those important matters. Of course, it's still up to the president and the exercise of his discretion whether or not he's going to do this. But on the part of where I stand and with the number of people I have been reading who agree, then part of the reason for itong conflict online or the conflicting or the arguments online is that there's there's an absence of an explanation on the timing of the increase of the number of cases to be accessed. Sabi ni John, ask ko lang kung sino ba ang mas makikinabang sa dalawang bansa o kung may pakinabang nga ba tayo talaga sa EDCA. Sana may agriculture version ng EDCA from Manitoba. Um, I wish there was something like that, but you know, both countries, the U.S. will never enter into an agreement where they don't think they're going to have any benefit. Altruism is good, yung charity is good, but it has to have something. They have to defend it to their own Congress dahil may pera na nilalaan para sa ganyan. And so, kailangan nakikita kung ano yung kanilang interests in that. And as we know, marami na silang pahayagan na nagsabi na they are just trying to close the loop or the arc around Taiwan to better safeguard the people there vis-a-vis threat from China. We have OFWs in Taiwan, so if the president had said that this was one of those reasons that he had agreed to the access, then I think that would be acceptable, diba? But so long as it is balanced with the possibility that we are going to directly be dragged into this conflict by the mere fact of our allowing additional equipment and personnel here. By the way, the additional personnel and equipment, I mean, that's a clear signal that they are preparing for something. Ah, sabi ni Ma'am Luis, ano po kaya ang nasa isip ni PBBM now na mas nakikinabang pinaboran niya ang US? Hindi po ba niya nakikita yung kapahamakan ng Pinas sa pinili niyang side? Wala na yung friend to all, enemy to none. Well, ako, I'd like to think that he has his reasons, no? And that these reasons are, in our interest. But until he actually says something, then we are merely speculating. Sabi ni Don, in 2008, I went to Taiwan as an election observer, and majority of their people voted no to Taiwan's return to UN. I think most of them don't want conflict with mainland China. Yes, of course. You know, I don't think that uh, that Taiwan, knowing the amount of destruction they could suffer, would actively um, campaign or exhort an adherence for conflict. Sabi ni Albert, I consider Ms. Sass's statements as serious and a warning to be taken seriously into consideration by the government. I agree. I agree. Sabi ni Ma'am Imelda, na sense ko may live po kayo. Salamat ah. Sabi ni Mind Freak, oh my, this is well said actually. In order to play chess, there must be two players and a chessboard. And that's what we are. Possibly. Possibly. Sabi ni Juan Yaete, his loud silence is alarming. Instead na sagutin niya yung mga worry ng mamamayan, andun siya sa ibang bansa, patuloy sa pagbenta sa PH as a militarized zone. I disagree naman that he's selling us as a militarized zone, although I understand that you're exaggerating to get your point across. Yeah, so I get it. I get it. Um, Remember, with regard to the issue on onions, tumaas po ang presyo and so on. Lumarag sana yung issue as early as November. And in December, the prices hit an all-time high. But his statement with regard to doing something about it happened in January. So I think we should take into consideration the president's timetable here. Maybe he is preparing to explain this. He might explain it at the SONA in July or um, here, earlier, sometime earlier. But um, yun. I don't think we can compel him to explain, but it would be very nice, and it would certainly put a lot of fears to rest if he did make a statement. Sabi ni Sir Albert, it has nothing to do with strengthening the U.S. allies in the region. Yes. Instead, putting us into something we cannot win or benefit from it, destruction. I agree. I agree. Well, the U.S. will always act in its own interests, diba? We should be uh, accepting of that. But what we want is that our officials will push strongly for our own interests to be put forward and to be put forward first in any agreement that we enter into. Otherwise, what would be the point? Sabi ni Sir Tony, hearing so many news about the US-China relationship, parang it's a matter of time na lang ang iniintay ng dalawang countries, nakakatakot. Yes, which is why the hearing from our officials is very important to allaying the fears of the public. And I'm sure, I am confident that sooner or later the president will speak and explain to us the timing of the additional personnel, um, and why he opted for this option instead of other options, like, let's say, a declaration of neutrality in this conflict, or a declaration of neutrality, period. I don't know. He must have his reasons, and we need to hear those reasons. But we don't assume that he is deliberately putting us in harm's way. I don't think that we would want to assume that. Sorry, inuubo pa po ako, ha. So, once in a while, uubuhin talaga ako. Which is now. Excuse me. Sabi ni Paul Bryan ko, I used to believe in PBBM, he just put us in harm's way. Well, I don't think it's non-salvageable. Um, he could still, well, he could still salvage the situation. Hi kay Adrian, nandito pala si Adrian. But beyond that, I'm not sure what else we can do given his commitment already. So, but it would be nice if he brought us along on this trip. What I mean is, when he makes these decisions, he's in his power to do so. He's the president. But it would be nice if we could be more supportive, and we can only do that if we had more information. Ito sabi ni Sir Francis, all statements are made by OIC Galvez, pati last minute talk sa Joint Patrol, waiting for finality kasi wala pang statement ang Commander-in-Chief. So there you go. So even the AFP is waiting. Sabi ni Ma'am Pinay, the coming presidential elections results in Taiwan next year will also affect us. Xi Jinping has already stated that war will only commence if Taiwan declares independence. Taiwan's major trade partner is China. There you go. Well, hopefully that remains. When we say there are many moving pieces, it means that these decisions could possibly not be permanent, or we're waiting also for outcomes and so on. Now, if the Doves win, then no problem. But the clear statement of a move towards the Philippines is like an amendment to our foreign policy declaration, moving slowly towards the US side, might also affect other things. Like I said, it's not just the possibility of conflict, but how it's going to affect other things like our trade relations. What about our fishermen? Would China react and take, you know, and and ratchet up the shooing away of our fishermen? What if they ratchet up also more constructions in the contested areas of the West Philippine Sea? Or their contested areas. No, not even contested. Kasi sa atin, it's pretty final. It's our EEZ. So in the areas that we have claimed as our own, what are they going to do? These things don't come without repercussions. Now, the repercussions could be as big as an international conflict, or as not so big as, taking frustrations out on our fisher folk. Sabi ni Sir Roger, what I think kung ano man na naging usapan ni na PBBM and China at his last visit, ito ang nag-trigger para i-consider at i-align niya ang EDCA. Well, that's also a possibility that we should consider. But he was transparent about the visit in China. So what do you think? What issue there triggered it? Sabi ni Sir Alvin, I think your response to my statement is valid. Here's my response. I like how he's so polite na. PBBM just had a visit in China hoping to talk. After that, China continues to allow the bullying fishermen. Actually, the Coast Guard, diba? To me, PBBM is showing strong leadership by showing that we will take measures to ensure our safety. Well, yes, this is a good response, actually. Thanks, bagamat we disagree on this issue, you're very respectful po. Well, I think everybody's opinion should be listened to, uh, and that we should take into consideration those that are reasonable. So here, I agree that adding additional forces. What he might be thinking is that it ensures the safety of our fisher folk in the West Philippine Sea. But here's the problem. They're not here for maritime issues, but for the humanitarian aid and um, disaster relief. Unless, of course, that's just a cover, in which case, well, it's possible that you're right also. Sabi ni at Kuya Nick, EDCA will help our military, but the worst case, we are again the shield of the US during the war. US needs overseas bases so that during the war, the country will not be the first target. Ouch. Yeah. Sabi ni Wanyete, US elections din sana makadelay sa inevitable war. I'm not sure if it's inevitable, sir, ha? Like I said, maraming moving parts. For the moment, there is a possibility. But because of all of these moving parts, yeah, we will have to continue monitoring the situation. Tignan natin kung dun pa rin patungo after a few months. US elections din sana makadelay. So pag natalo si Biden at mawala na sa White House, pwede, pwede. He's the hawk, eh, no? Nagpapa-shoutout si Ma'am Gladys sa husband niya kay Aranilla ako. Hi po. Right? It may not look like it, but I'm yelling at you. Kay Sir Aranilla ako. Sabi ni Bert, we are more pawn than the chessboard. Watching and listening while cooking food si Barrett. Watching from Hong Kong. Much love. Good evening din po sa lahat. Last na, sabi ni Sir Alvin. Pahaba ng pahaba, Sir Alvin. Ha? I think the US government and PBBM or the Philippine government are getting ready for the worst scenario. Even if we don't add sites, if war erupts in Taiwan, we will still be affected in some degree, especially if it involves nuclear war. Fence sitting or staying neutral may have its advantages, but honoring and strengthening our commitment to EDCA may also prove that we're friend to all, enemy to none. Well, sir, I think if the president is acutely aware of the coming conflict and this is his way of preparing for it, then my concern now is the food situation. Because while he may be preparing for it on this aspect, the preparation on the aspect of our food self-sufficiency and security has been not as swift in the response. So it doesn't appear like it's in harmony with the other policies. Like I said, I think that what you're saying is valid. I agree with the part that he's this is his response to China's actions in the South China Sea with regard to our own fisher folk. But that might be ignoring the conflict aspect. Still, not a bad theory. Sabi dito, still, sana instead na i-approve niya yung additional bases, sumali na lang sa BRICS. Actually, there are no additional bases nga, well, there are no additional bases established, What they are is they have access to additional military camps, or in some cases, um, more areas in the military camps where they already are in. Sa news, may isang governor na hindi sang-ayon, si Governor Mamba, sa additional sites. Pwede po ba gawin ng local government to decline additional site in their area? They can decline, but they can only manifest to the president, and work it out through the DILG na hindi gamitin yung region nila where those that have camps situated in their regions. They can make themselves heard and negotiate through the DILG kasi hindi naman pa po ina-announce exactly kung saan lahat ng additional sites na ito. Sabi ni Marus, tuba yung statement sa VFA na hindi tutulong ang US kung mag-i-invasion galing sa Pasipiko. I don't think that's in the that's in the agreement. Here, let me show you. Okay, I have the visiting forces agreement here. Lipat ko lang sa screen ko, ha. And I will present a new one. Share screen. Chrome tab. Ayan. Here. So I don't think it's there. See? Shall facilitate. This is, because the visiting forces agreement is about, criminal jurisdiction, and so on. Oh, I'm sorry. Teka, maliit masyado yung screen natin. Sorry. Natanggal pala. Add to stream there, and then lakihan natin. Ito. Here. It doesn't indicate here anything about the possibility of conflict. See? This is only about the conduct of the visiting forces in the Philippines. So, if you're talking about the MDT, the Mutual Defense Treaty, here I'll show it to you also. Medyo hindi ganun kabilis kasi yung paglipat-lipat dito sa StreamYard. Here. In the Mutual Defense Treaty, in Article 4, each party recognizes that an armed attack in the Pacific area on either of the parties would be dangerous to its own. Ayan, Article 4 would be dangerous to its own peace and safety, and declares that it would act to meet the common dangers in accordance with its constitutional processes. Okay. Armed attack in the Pacific. Okay. So the Mutual Defense Treaty only refers to the Pacific area. If there's an armed attack in the Pacific area, it doesn't even have to be on any of our countries. On either of the parties, would be dangerous to its own peace and safety. An armed attack on the Pacific on either of the parties. So, pwede kasi yung yung mga vessels natin would be dangerous to its own peace and safety, and declares that it would act to meet the common dangers in accordance with its constitutional processes. Act to meet common dangers, that's another term that we have to be cognizant of. It must be common danger to both the Philippines and the US. Declares that it would act. So each party recognizes that an armed attack in the Pacific area on either of the parties would be dangerous to its own peace and safety, and declares that it would act to meet the common dangers in accordance with its constitutional processes. So ang ibig sabihin po niyan is that they won't respond immediately. They will respond in accordance to their laws. So if their law allows them to respond immediately, then that's not an issue. Pero kung kailangan pa ng declaration or an act of Congress, that will take some time. So yun yung sinasabi nila. It's not that they won't act, but they will have to act according to the constitutional processes. Sabi ni Monbay, I don't know, because he has an entire nation's problems to attend to. Do you always get an explanation on everything from your parents? But sir, my parents are not bound by the Constitution with regard to the relationship with me. The the foremost policy of this government is transparency, and this is in the Constitution as well. So, and on matters like this, where the people are not at ease, and it could endanger some political processes, then don't you think that an explanation ought to be forthcoming? We're not saying that we can compel the president to speak when he doesn't want to, but don't you think that it would be politic for him to do so, to address the fears of a nation that looks up to him as their leader? I think that since he blogs anyway and he does make himself accessible to the media, then this should be one of those things that could be included when he addresses them. Why the silence? Diba? Why the silence on a matter that bothers the people that he's seeking to lead? Well, not seeking to lead, I'm sorry, that he's leading. Sabi ni Jesus, mula noong December 10 sa Treaty of Paris, bakit hindi sinamantala ng US ang pagkakataon na sakupin din ng West Philippine Sea, South China Sea? Because we did not actually occupy it. The reason we acquired the Kalayaan Island Group, for instance, was because of its occupation by the US na nga. They were there. But primarily because the Japanese occupied it. Diyan po sila nag-launch ang Navy nila ng attacks on the Philippines uh, in 1941, if I'm not mistaken. Tama ba? 1941, no? So, uh, because Japan occupied it when they as an occupying force, when they left and we retained it, then we considered it that became the basis for our claim of the Kalayaan Island Group as territory of the Philippines. So hindi po ito bunga ng Treaty of Paris, bunga po ito ng World War II. Sabi ni Ma'am Christina, I read Bobby Tiglau's article in the Manila Times today. It is also possible that kaya nadagdag si PB, nagdagdag ng facilities, it is a choice of the lesser evil, knowing what the US can do if hindi niya mapagbigyan. That's another, yes. I agree with that one. That's a good thesis. Ito sabi ni Rain, neutrality does not mean it will antagonize the other. What happens kasi is that we want friendly relations with China while antagonizing the US. It's still not neutrality, it's oxymoronic. Sabi ni Wanya, China versus US pa lang pinag-uusapan natin. Wala pa yung conflict sa Korean Peninsula. Tapos andun din si US, nakikisawsaw, damay din tayo, andito yung mga puti. You're right, I haven't considered that yet. I didn't even factor that in yet. So, I think overall, the reason for if tama yung sinasabi ninyo that the president chose the lesser evil, then yes, then why not say it? But I would agree. I think we don't have any choice but to abide by it. But it also sounds reasonable. I get it. I get it. But given the choice, the fact that you have a third choice, which is neutrality, the question remains: why not neutrality? Why did we have to do that? If, however, there was a threat to him by foreign forces of, let's say, being deposed or something like that, then all the more that he should have reported this to the Filipino people so that we can protect him. At any rate, the idea is to allay the fears of people. But I agree with some of your theories on why this was the particular choice. Sabi ni Ma'am Cheryl, bakit importante sa US ang Taiwan? Bakit kailangan nilang makisawsaw sa issue between China and Taiwan? Because Taiwan has proven to be very, very pro-US. They also have uh, manufacturing plants there, if I'm not mistaken, semiconductors in Taiwan. So they have a lot of business interests there, especially now that China had been removing US citizens, di ba? Yeah, sorry, sabi ni Sir June, microchip manufacturing. Yes, thank you. Sabi ni Bert, semicon nga po. Ay, okay. Sabi ni Sunny Doloroso, do you think the president will speak out and explain his decision? I think that he probably doesn't consider it a priority right now, considering that there are other matters that occupy his time, particularly making sure, well, selling the country as an investment destination. And it's possible that consonant to this investment destination ideal, uh, other investors might find a more, well, no, that's really far-fetched. Sabi ni Boss Conrad, these might be two conflicting things. Yung getting investors to come here, but investors might think twice if with an increased US presence, it brings us into the line of fire or puts us in harm's way. On the other hand, if the potential investors think that the US troops bring stability, then that might make it even a better viable, the Philippines as a viable investment destination. Sabi ni Ma'am Joan, Taiwan's biggest chip maker already created a factory in the US. Yes, and I think given the tensions, that some of them will completely move out of Taiwan. But until then, it becomes a concern for the US. Sabi ni Mon, with all due respect, you chose to leave government. We should have been hearing the explanation through your then office. Just be patient. We're trying to be. What do you mean you're trying to be? Trying to be what? Trying to exist? And what happens, what the result of my leaving office means that I can express an opinion now. So with all due respect as well, if you do respect me, then you would respect my ability to be able to speak my mind. Now, what I wonder is why it is necessary for you uh, to dismiss this right that I am exercising simply because I chose to leave government. Didn't I regain the opportunity and the right as well by leaving government? So eventually, I think also Filipinos being Filipinos is that we will be fair enough, sabi ni Sermon. Well, thank you. Um, Okay. Well, I think that primarily we should continue to monitor the situation and listen. Maybe the president will give us clues or cues or whatever, or maybe more explanations will be forthcoming from Secretary Galvez. Any additional information coming from government would be very welcome. Sabi ni Ma'am Cheryl, kailangan maraming kababayan natin ang makaalam sa issue about EDCA. Kaya siguro tahimik ang media at ang Malacanang para maging matagumpay na maipatayo ang 4 na additional US military bases sa Pinas. Ma'am, I don't think there's a question na magiging matagumpay because it's official. Dadating sila at maglalagay sila ng additional na tropa at saka ng equipment nila dito. I think the furor, okay, the online, parang the mini online explosion of opinions is primarily because we're concerned about being dragged into the conflict. So, with some statements that might allay some fears in us. Pero there's no question na makakapasok yung additional access ng visiting forces sa ating mga military bases. Okay? So I'm hoping also the reason we're conducting this live is so that we can meet some of the deficiencies in information. But for instance, what the MDT is about, what the EDCA really is about, like these five concerns, and what the visiting forces agreement is primarily about. Sabi ni Rain, if we leave the US side, also you're saying that we are on the US side already. What is the guarantee we won't have the same with China? There are no guarantees. The same way that being on the side of the US is not a guarantee that we're going to survive a conflict. Yeah. Then there are no guarantees. You can't ask for guarantees because there are none. Not in an age of nuclear weapons. So, we're like that with the US last 1898. Sinakop tayo ng mga kano, hindi pa ba tayo nadadala? So, I don't think the question here is to side with who to side with, the US or China. The question is, why not neutrality? Why are we doing it this way? Yeah, things like that. Sabi ni Bert, the Philippines is always being dragged into conflict, the Spanish-American War and the Japanese-American War, and now on the third time. Maybe. Henry asks, pwede bang i-scrap yung agreement? Yes, sir. I'm not sure kung kailan yung exchange of instruments. We signed the EDCA in 2014, but the effectivity date was upon receipt of the signed agreement. So to be safe, I'm putting it at 2015. So it expires in 2025. And if we renew it, it will no longer have a reckoning date, a deadline. Kumbaga, tuloy-tuloy na siya, and you can abrogate it simply by giving a 1-year notice to the US from our end. The US can also do the same to us. So yes, pwede naman pong iwan yan. Sabi ni Maming, dito for example, sermon, malaya kang direktang nasasagot ni attorney. Pag sa palasyo, sa tingin mo ba nasasagot ka directly? Uy, grabe, huwag yun umawayin. Okay na yan, I think he understands naman. Sabi ni Rain, inevitable daw na mamili tayo. Well, Switzerland never chose a side. I think neutrality is possible. Dahil both powers will pressure us. Kapag nagpang-abot yan, saan tayo lulugar? Open city tayo ulit. Actually, yung friend to all, enemy to none is a level of neutrality. It's not absolute. It allows us to continue relations with both countries without or with any country without necessarily being seen as favoring one over the other. I think that's it. I think the president was correct already when he chose friend to all and enemy to none as the primary foreign policy here. And that is already a form of neutrality. But that's why it raised alarm bells, is because by those three the confluence of the three things that he manifested, the joint patrols, the increase in access to our bases, and the statement that the US will always be in our future, moves us away from that neutrality. Diba? So, hindi sa inevitable eh. We will continue. Neutrality, you don't violate neutrality by having trade relations. You don't violate neutrality by, the only thing that you really avoid is any military connection. I mean, you can buy military equipment and so on from other countries without necessarily violating your own neutrality. Ito, sabi ni Ma'am June, Thailand was not invaded by the Japanese in World War II because they declared neutrality. Yes, and it was respected. Way I feel it says, oops, inuubo na po ako, says that um, hindi bibitiwan ng China ang nine-dash line, much more Taiwan as one of their provinces, and the US presence here will just suck us more into the China agenda. Wala na tayong neutrality. Ang init, grabe. I have to drink hot things kasi masakit pa yung lalamunan ko. I'm getting over a sore throat and a cough, pero it's still present. So yeah, that's certainly a way of looking at it, and I agree with some of it. Yung sinasabi ni way I see it. We'll continue talking. You can continue asking questions about the agreements, those three agreements. MDT, EDCA, VFA, even in subsequent lives, because I think that the one thing that we can do is to discuss it so that there's better understanding and to look at what is in black and white so that we can eliminate fears that are unfounded. Okay, so that there are no fears or misconceptions based on the black letter, meaning the agreements, the agreements that are in writing. So if we can eliminate that, the speculation, a lot of the speculation can be minimized, then we can at least have a more rational appreciation either of the president's actions or of the consequences of that. Sabi ni Kuya Nick, we can have neutrality if we abandon MDT and China withdraws from the West Philippine Sea. You know what? You can't set a policy that depends on a third party or on another country's decisions. You can decide on neutrality even if they are there. Kasi a neutral country can also still defend itself. Okay? So if there are no other questions, I realize that people want to talk about this. And, I noticed that it doesn't run out eh. Kahit paano pinag-uusapan pa rin. So I'd like to continue talking about it if, if you want to. Kasi, maraming fears that might be allayed. But on the other hand, I think that we should keep asking for more information on this one, particularly when it comes to decisions that will affect us so profoundly. Sabi ni Unique Soul Provider, why is the president singing a different tune now about EDCA? Well, I'm not sure if it was different. Possibly different in our appreciation from his previously stated policy of friend to all, enemy to none, diba? Well, that's I think why a lot of us would like to hear his side on this one. It's very important, diba? A lot of people have taken up the cudgels for him, so it would be nice also for him to acknowledge those people by saying, okay, this is the reason why. But I'm not going to yet ha, kumbaga, I'm not going to vilify him yet until I hear his side. Sabi ni Joss, simply sana mag-guest niya si Miss Sass sa Karambola, parang di pa nangyayari yun. That's a good point. Sige, we will consider that. That's a good suggestion. Sabi ni Christine, thanks, refreshing this out on our own since we're not told anything. So hard to feel part of nation building when we're not told anything. Well, we're told other things naman. We're not completely left out. But this one is important and a lot of people feel there's not enough information. Sabi ni Ma'am Christine, yes, please invite Sas to Karambola. Well, yeah, of course, we'll consider. Pinapaalam pa po yan, tapos isi-schedule yan, if ever. Sabi ni Ma'am Ying, yung dumating na approval sa application ng Pinoy pero yung sahod niya sa gobyerno is contractual ala pa since December. Ay, ano yan? Te, may ganyan? Okay. Hi, Kaylin. Don is watching from Chicago. Okay, is there anything, meron pa bang gustong magpa-shoutout bago tayo good night? And we will still have Sutil Saturday, traveling Sutil Saturday tayo tomorrow. We'll be going north. So, siguro sa Dao lang kami, but we'll be out tomorrow. So, magsusutil Saturday tayo for some lighter fare. Di ba? Um, Out of topic po, bakit wala si Boss Conrad sa Karambola? Nakakamiss din pala pag wala siya. Sabi ni Ma'am Christine. I think he was playing golf. We just got our signals crossed. Uh, Meron pala siyang golf yata kanina and hindi niya nasabi or parang nagkamali ng pag-cite ng date. Sabi ni Jocelyn, please, saan kayo sa Dao? Ay, hindi ko po alam kasi si Ahmed ang si Ahmed yung may lakad at sumasama lang ako, just nakikimiron lang ako. So, we'll be announcing it tomorrow pag nag-live kami on the way to Dao or in Dao. Sabi ni Sir Samuel, thank you for the information. Sabi ni Sir Francis, golf is priority. Ay, grabe kayo. But, he hasn't. Ako, bigay na natin kay Boss Conrad. Matagal na siyang hindi nakakapag-golf and really enjoying it. So, I'm happy that he was able to go kanina. That's assuming he really was at golf. So, let's see. Sabi ni Joe, simply pa fan meet. Oh, sige, sasabihin ko naman kung saan kami. Panata na tong live mo, sabi ni Bibi. Sakali maka-perfect attendance, baka maka-affab. Ha! Joke lang. Grabe kayo. Attorney Ahmed, we will forget your heartworm mode. Iakyat mo lang si Attorney. So, Baguio pa pala, di ba? We have a Baguio scheduled, kaya lang meron kaming Davao supposedly next week. So, i-announce naman po namin. I think we're giving a talk somewhere in possibly in Tagum, but I'm not sure yet about the details. So, pero kasi kung wala 'yon, dapat nasa Baguio kami next week. Mauuna syempre yung seryosong lakad bago yung Kengkoy lakad. May calendars pa po, so si Mami Ying gets one dahil pupuntahan ko siya sa Baguio as soon as possible. Sabi ni Sir Albert, isn't allowing more access to cite a clear statement from PBBM's green light. Well, I think more access plus the joint patrols, although both are covered by the EDCA. So, sabi ni Iya, nationwide tour ng Luminous, Bikinimen South next. Opo, definitely will be going south sometime this year. Pa-regards daw, sabi ni Cheryl kay Attorney Ahmed, my awesome crush. Okay po. I'm sure he's not really, nagkakarpentero eh. Pero sige po, we'll let him know. Team replay daw si Zam. Ay, gusto pang humabol ni Rain ng usapang showbiz. Friendship over na ba si Sasa at Pipi? Nagpaparinigan na kasi. Grabe kayo, as if naman. Alam nyo, we don't take sides on this issue. Pero I wouldn't consider it as over. They're friends. They've been through a lot, and I think this is just a bump in the road. If not, then it might be that they're just growing in different directions. Either way, I have no personal knowledge kung over na talaga yan because you never know what tomorrow will bring. So, maraming salamat sa lahat ng sumubaybay. Nag-overtime pa tayo. Okay. Maraming salamat din sa likes and shares and stars and super chat, super stickers or anything like that. Thank you very, very much. And also, I always ano, thank people who pray for us. Um, well, or people who think good thoughts about us, who post nice things about us, and so on. You know, of all the things that you can do for yourself, you did for us. Thank you very, very much. I also would like to thank everybody who sent me shoes. Kasi I think I received 4 pairs in the past week alone. So thank you very, very much for all that. 6.5. Yes, tama yung size. Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow on Sutil Saturday. Don't forget to like and share. And don't forget, follow sa Trixie Cruz-Angeles or sa Luminous if you can find it na. Kung hindi pa po nahahanap, eventually po i-merge namin yung 2 pages na yon and makikita na lahat. So, thank you very, very much for those follows and especially dun sa mga nagsusubscribe sa YouTube kasi gusto natin paabutin ng 100,000. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Have a pleasant rest of the night and rest. Everybody get a good rest. Para dun sa sa si Victor ngayon lang dumating, sayang, oh. Um, for everybody who is still just going to work because you're on the other side of the world, I hope you all have a good day. Happy weekend.